At 22, I carried a billionaire couple's baby for money, signed away my rights, took the check, disappeared. 15 years later, their jet went down, and their will named me guardian of the daughter I was never supposed to call mine. They raised her like a product. Metrics, brand deals, engagement scores. 15 years old, and she's never been allowed to be a child. Now she's alone in a mansion full of people who see her as an asset. And somewhere in that house, her grandmother is already planning what comes next. The envelope says I have 72 hours to decide, but I decided 15 years ago. I just didn't know what I was deciding. In the next hour, you'll discover what happens when a woman learns the daughter she gave away is worth $340 million to the people who stole her, and worthless without her love. Stay with me and comment below. Would you have taken the $75,000 at 22? Subscribe, and let's find out together. Welcome to American Billionaire Tales. 3 days later, I sat in a law office that cost more per square foot than my annual salary. The room was all mahogany and leather, old money made architectural. Edmund Langford, the Armitage family attorney, sat across from me behind a desk that probably had its own biography. He was 62, silver-haired, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had reviewed 1,000 wills and never flinched. His hands, when he opened the file, were steady. Mine were not. "Ms. Morell?" His voice was carefully neutral. "You've been named contingency guardian of Aurelia Armitage." The words landed like stones in still water. I blinked. "I'm sorry, guardian?" Mr. and Mrs. Armitage were specific in their provisions. He adjusted his glasses, a tell I would later learn meant discomfort. "In the event of their simultaneous death, you are to assume full guardianship of their daughter." "There must be a mistake." My voice came out thinner than I intended. "I was their surrogate 15 years ago. I carried the pregnancy, signed the termination, took the payment, and never saw them again. There is no mistake." Movement to my left. I'd almost forgotten she was there. Vivian Armitage sat in the corner chair like a queen holding court in exile. 68 years old, silver-white hair and a perfect chin-length bob, steel blue-gray eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. She wore black, elegant, expensive black, and her posture was military. She hadn't slouched once in the 40 minutes I'd been in that room. Her expression was carved from something colder than marble. "My objection is on the record," she said. Not to me, to Langford, as if I wasn't worth addressing directly. "Noted and overruled by the explicit terms of the will." Langford's tone didn't waver. "Mr. Armitage was quite clear." I leaned forward. "Why me? I was just the carrier. They have family. They have—" I gestured toward Vivian without looking at her. "Why would they choose a stranger?" Langford removed his glasses, slowly, deliberately. "The will contains conditions, Ms. Morell. You must reside at the Armitage estate. You must maintain Aurelia's existing public obligations, foundation appearances, media commitments. You must avoid scandal. And you will serve as tiebreaker on the Armitage Foundation board." Public obligations. For a 15-year-old girl. They'd scheduled her grief. "And if I refuse?" "Guardianship reverts to Mrs. Armitage." He paused. "Along with full control of Aurelia's trust and the Foundation's direction." I looked at Vivian then. Her chin lifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. The look of someone who expected me to fail and was already planning for it. "Mr. Langford," I steadied my voice. "Why would Theron Armitage trust a woman he met twice, 15 years ago, with his daughter and his empire. The attorney's hesitation lasted exactly 1 second. But I caught it. There are documents. You'll receive them at the estate. He closed the file. When you've made your decision. Documents. At the estate. Where I'd have to go to find out why I was there in the first place. Billionaires. Even dead, they made you play by their rules. The taxi turned onto the private drive, and I understood immediately why the fare from the station had made the driver whistle. The Armitage estate unfolded like a threat wrapped in architecture. Georgian columns, 40 acres of manicured grounds, a hedge maze I could see from half a mile away, clipped so precisely it looked computer-generated. The main house rose at the end of the drive, 12,000 square feet of old money-made stone, with windows that probably cost more than my apartment building. I'd packed one suitcase. It sat on the seat beside me like an apology. The taxi stopped at the entrance. Before I could reach for the door, it opened from outside. A staff member in black, face neutral, eyes carefully avoiding mine. Another appeared from my suitcase. Neither spoke. I stepped onto gravel that probably had a pedigree and looked up at the house that was about to swallow me whole. The foyer was a cathedral of wealth. Double-height ceiling, marble floors polished to mirrors, a staircase that swept upward like it was auditioning for a period drama, and everywhere, portraits. Armitages stared down from gilt frames, generations of sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. And at the landing, dominating the entrance, Theron and Seraphine. Oil paint had made them immortal. Theron's ice-blue eyes, charismatic even in 2 dimensions. Seraphine's photogenic perfection, her smile practiced until it photographed like joy. They looked like they'd been born, knowing they would hang in frames, and had dressed accordingly. I stood beneath them in my teacher's blazer and my sensible boots, and I understood something clearly. This house had been designed to make people feel small. It was working. "Miss Morrell?" A woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared at my elbow. "Your suite is prepared, if you'll follow me." My suite. Like I was checking into a hotel instead of signing up for a siege. We climbed the staircase, walked down a hallway lined with more portraits, more closed doors, more silence. The carpet swallowed our footsteps. The walls watched. The housekeeper stopped at a door and opened it without entering. "Mrs. Armitage has arranged for dinner at 7. The family will be present." The family, said like a warning. She left before I could thank her, or ask her name, or confirm that the tremor in my hands wasn't visible. I stepped into a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. 4-poster bed, silk curtains, fresh flowers on a marble-topped dresser, white roses, the kind that cost $40 a stem. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the back gardens where a fountain caught late afternoon light. Everything was perfect. Everything was expensive. Nothing was warm. I set my single suitcase on the bed and sat beside it, suddenly exhausted. 15 years ago, I'd carried their child for $75,000 and a contract that said I would disappear. Now their house was trying to convince me I was the one who didn't belong. I had 2 hours until dinner. 2 hours to figure out how to survive a family that had decided, before meeting me, that I shouldn't exist. Dinner wasn't for another hour, but I couldn't sit in that beautiful cage waiting for the walls to close in. I found my way to a formal living room on the ground floor. Cream silk furniture, a fireplace large enough to stand in, windows, overlooking the dying January light. I stood at the edge of a Persian rug that probably cost more than my car and tried to remember why I'd agreed to this. The door opened behind me. "So you're the one." I turned. Aurelia Armitage stood in the doorway like she'd been summoned to identify a body. She was 15, but her eyes were older. Dark, honey-blonde hair, professionally maintained, slightly limp, like she hadn't washed it since the crash. Heart-shaped face. Prominent cheekbones, a little too sharp. She was thinner than healthy. Fair skin with dark circles she hadn't bothered to conceal. She wore all black. Oversized cashmere sweater, sleeves pulled over her hands. Black leggings. Bare feet on cold marble. But it was her eyes that stopped me. Amber brown, almond-shaped, slightly downturned at the outer corners. Something flickered in my chest. Recognition I couldn't place. "I'm Cassia," I said. My voice came out wrong. Too gentle, too hopeful. "I know this is strange. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just want to help. You carried me for money." Her voice was flat. Not angry, worse than angry. Matter of fact. "You were 22. You needed cash. My parents needed a womb with the right genetics." She tilted her head, assessing me the way her grandmother had. $75,000. That was the price, right? I looked it up. She looked it up. A 15-year-old girl researching her own commodified origin story. "Aurelia, you signed away your rights before I could breathe." Still flat, still steady. "You took the check and disappeared for 15 years. Now they're dead, and you're back." Her eyes, my eyes, though I didn't know it yet, hardened. "Don't pretend it's anything other than what it is." I should have had an answer. Something honest about guilt, about curiosity, about a phone call that shattered my quiet life. But her words had found the soft place I'd been protecting since I was 22, and they'd pressed. "I'm not here for money." She almost smiled. Almost. It was worse than a frown. "Everyone says that. Everyone always says that." She turned. The door closed behind her. Not a slam, just a soft, devastating click. The sound of someone who had learned that closing doors quietly hurt more than slamming them. I stood alone in the firelight, her accusation ringing in the silence. "You carried me for money." The worst part was, I couldn't tell her she was wrong. Dinner was a performance. The food was exquisite, and no one tasted it. The dining room could have seated 30. We sat at one end of a table long enough to land a plane on. Vivienne at the head, Aurelia to her right, me across from the girl, and at the far corner, a man I hadn't met. He was 35, dark brown hair pushed back from his forehead, with threads of gray at the temples. Deep-set, dark brown eyes. Strong jaw with stubble that read as quiet rebellion against the formal setting. A scar on his left jawline. Old. Faded to white. He watched me the way a prosecutor watches a witness. "My grandson, Dorian." Vivienne didn't look up from her plate. "Theron's son from his first marriage." First marriage. Which meant not Seraphine's child. Which meant not Aurelia's full brother. Which meant, I did the math quickly, cut out of something, somewhere. Or he wouldn't be sitting at the corner like an afterthought. "Welcome to the estate, Ms. Morel." His voice was baritone, carefully neutral. "I'm sure you'll find it comfortable." The pause before comfortable said everything. Vivienne set down her fork with surgical precision. "Ms. Morel." First time she'd addressed me directly since the law office. "Aurelia has obligations this week. A foundation appearance Thursday, a brief interview with the Times on Friday. She is expected to maintain her schedule." I looked at Aurelia. The girl was pushing food around her plate, not eating. Her eyes were fixed on a point somewhere beyond the window. She just lost her parents. I kept my voice even. Maybe the schedule should wait. Silence. Vivian's smile was thin enough to cut glass. How thoughtful. She picked up her wine. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Ms. Morel. For now. But Aurelia has responsibilities, a legacy. She's not to be disrupted. The threat was wrapped in silk, but it was still a threat. Dinner ended without dessert, without conversation, without Aurelia ever meeting my eyes. I was heading back to my room when a voice stopped me in the hallway. Ms. Morel? Dorian stood behind me. He'd removed his jacket, rolled his sleeves, hands that didn't match his suits, calloused, working hands. A man who did something with them besides sign checks. Let me save us both some time. He stepped closer. The hallway felt smaller. I've watched opportunists circle this family my whole life. Fortune hunters, social climbers, people who see Aurelia as a transaction. I'm not. Prove it. His dark brown eyes were steady. Because from where I stand, you're a stranger who took money for your womb 15 years ago, and now you're back the moment there's an inheritance in play. My jaw tightened. I didn't ask for this. Neither did she. He let that land. I don't have proof, I said quietly, that I'm not what you think. I just have my word. He studied me. The scar on his jaw caught the hallway light. Then you have nothing. He walked away. His footsteps faded down the marble corridor, leaving me alone with the portraits and the silence. 2 confrontations in 2 hours. Grandmother, brother, both watching, waiting for me to fail. And the girl I was supposed to protect wouldn't even look at me. I returned to my room and sat on the bed that wasn't mine, in a house that didn't want me, and wondered what Theron Armitage had known that made this cruelty feel like a plan. I unpacked what little I'd brought, placed my mother's photograph on the nightstand, a reminder of who I was before this house tried to tell me who I wasn't. On the dresser, the estate had left a welcome folder, leather-bound, embossed with the Armitage crest. I'd ignored it until now. I opened it expecting schedules, maps, household rules. Instead, I found a photograph. Aurelia, 5 years old, at a gala by the look of the lighting, chandeliers, crystal, adults in formal wear blurred behind her. She wore a white dress with a satin sash, hair perfectly curled, smile perfectly practiced. A child performing childhood for an audience. I studied her face. The baby fat hadn't yet carved into the sharp cheekbones I'd met tonight. But her eyes were already old. And they were mine. I held the photograph closer. The amber brown flecked with gold in the gala lighting, the almond shape, the slight downturn at the outer corners. My eyes looked back at me from a 5-year-old's face. I set the photograph down, picked it up again, compared her nose to the reflection I could see in the window glass. Straight, slight upturn at the tip. My nose. Her cheekbones, the shape of her chin, the exact tilt of her head when she was being assessed. I'd done the same thing in the law office yesterday, and in the living room this evening, and my hands were shaking. I closed the folder, opened it again, stared at the girl who was supposed to be a stranger's daughter, and saw my own face at 5 years old, staring back. I wasn't their gestational carrier. I was something else. Something they'd hidden for 15 years. Something Theron Armitage had put in his will because he knew he'd always known. I should have packed my bag, called a taxi, run from this house and whatever truth it was hiding. Instead, I put the photograph in my nightstand drawer, and I stayed. Because the girl with my eyes was sleeping somewhere in this house, surrounded by people who saw her as a line item. And if I was what I suspected I was, then I was the only person in this mansion who might see her as a daughter. Langford had mentioned documents waiting at the estate. I thought of the hallway I'd walked after dinner, the closed doors. One of them had been different, heavier, darker wood, a brass plate I hadn't been able to read in the dim light. Theron's study. It had to be. Whatever he knew, whatever he'd hidden in that room, I was going to find it. Even if it destroyed everything. I woke before dawn with the photograph on my nightstand and a plan forming in my chest. The estate had a library. Estates like this always had libraries, and libraries had photo albums, records, the kind of family history that couldn't be hidden in locked studies. I dressed in what I'd brought for casual, a soft gray sweater, dark jeans, ankle boots, teacher clothes, the uniform of a woman who didn't belong here and had stopped pretending otherwise. The library was on the east wing, floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves, leather-bound volumes no one had read in decades. Morning light slanting through windows tall enough to require scaffolding to clean. And there, on the bottom shelf near the fireplace, albums. I started with the oldest, Aurelia's baby pictures. She'd been a beautiful infant, round cheeks, soft, wisps of honey-blonde hair, and those eyes, already amber brown, already watching the camera like she knew she was being documented. I turned the pages. First birthday, second, third. My hands grew cold. Every year the resemblance sharpened. Her nose narrowed like mine, her chin tilted like mine. By 5, she was the photograph in my nightstand, the one I couldn't stop looking at. By 7, she was my childhood. Finding what you're looking for? I closed the album too fast. Edmund Langford stood in the library doorway, briefcase in hand. He must have come for foundation business. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the morning light as he studied me with the careful neutrality of a man who'd learned not to take sides. Just getting to know the family. I slid the album back onto the shelf. Mr. Langford, I have a question. The surrogacy clinic from 15 years ago. Would their records still exist? His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. All records were sealed at the time of the arrangement, standard practice. But they'd still exist somewhere. Medical files, consent forms. I'm afraid I couldn't say. He adjusted his glasses. The same tell I'd noticed at the will reading. Is there something specific you're looking for, Ms. Morell? Yes. I'm looking for proof that I'm not losing my mind. That a billionaire didn't steal my genetics and raise my daughter without telling me. Just curious, I said instead. About the process. He nodded, a dismissal wrapped in politeness, and left. I waited until his footsteps faded. Then I left the library and walked the halls I'd memorized since arrival, counting doors until I found it. The study. Theron's study. Locked. Heavier than the other doors. Brass plate reading, "Private," in script that cost more than my monthly rent. That room is being inventoried. I didn't jump. I was learning not to. Vivian stood at the end of the hallway, backlit by a window. Black cashmere cardigan today, pearl earrings, posture straight enough to hang paintings from. She held a coffee cup like it was a scepter. For the estate, she continued. Mr. Armitage's personal effects require cataloging. Of course. I kept my voice even. I was just exploring. Exploration can be dangerous in unfamiliar territory, Ms. Morell. She smiled, the thin kind that never reached her eyes. one might find doors that don't open, or worse, doors that do. She turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against the marble like a countdown. I looked at the locked door, at the brass plate, at the secrets a dead man had hidden behind it. Doors that do. I was going to find a way in. Tonight. The next morning, I learned what Vivian meant by obligations. Aurelia's schedule arrived on my phone at 7 a.m. A calendar invitation I hadn't requested, synced without my permission. The subject line read, Aurelia Armitage, Q1 Visibility Plan. I read it twice to make sure I understood. 9 o'clock, Foundation Gala Preparation, Wardrobe, Hair, Makeup Review. 11 o'clock, Media Training Session, 1400. Board Briefing with R. Calloway, 1600. Photography Test for Spring Campaign. Her parents had been dead for 2 weeks, and today she had a spring campaign. I found her in the East sitting room, surrounded by people who didn't see her. 3 stylists circled like well-dressed vultures holding fabric swatches against her skin, while a photographer adjusted lighting rigs. Aurelia sat motionless in a chair, dark honey blonde hair being twisted into elaborate configurations, face blank as they debated camera angles. She wore a white silk blouse and tailored gray trousers. Foundation ready, brand appropriate. 15 years old and dressed for a shareholder meeting. The cheekbones photograph better from the left. The photographer, a woman with aggressive bangs and no discernible empathy, tilted Aurelia's chin without asking. But we need to soften the eyes. She looks tired. She lost her parents 2 weeks ago, I said. Every head turned. The photographer's smile was patient in the way that meant impatient. And condolences, of course, but the Foundation Gala is in 4 days. The donors expect continuity. Before I could respond, a new voice cut through. The donors expect results. Rhodes Calloway entered like he owned the room, which, in a board member's sense, he did. 50 years old, salt and pepper hair gelled over a receding hairline. Small, gray-green eyes that calculated value before processing humanity. Expensive suit that didn't quite fit. A man caught between sizes and pretending otherwise. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light as he gestured toward Aurelia like she was a slide in a presentation. Aurelia's visibility is directly tied to Foundation donor retention. 62% recognition factor. He smiled at her. The smile of a man discussing quarterly projections. The Davos panel next month is critical. We'll prep talking points this afternoon. Aurelia nodded, dead-eyed, compliant. I watched her jaw tighten beneath the foundation they'd applied. She's a child, I said quietly. Not a brand ambassador. Rhodes' smile didn't waver. She's the face of a $4.2 billion legacy, Ms. Morell. With respect, you've been here 2 days. We've been building this for 15 years. Building this. Like Aurelia was a product launch. The session continued for 3 more hours. I watched, I took notes. I memorized the way Aurelia's eyes went flat when they discussed engagement metrics, and the way her hands, hidden beneath the styling cape, picked at her cuticles until they bled. That evening, I found her in her room. She sat on the floor of her vast bedroom, back against her bed, legs pulled to her chest. The elaborate hair had been dismantled, the makeup washed off, leaving dark circles visible again. She wore her armor, oversized black sweater, sleeves over hands. In her lap, a magazine. Her own face on the cover. Age 12, maybe 13. The headline, "The Billion-Dollar Heiress Speaks." They used to show me these when I was 7. Her voice was distant. Look how beautiful you are. like that was supposed to be a compliment. I stepped into the doorway but didn't enter. Aurelia. I learned to smile on command. She looked up. Her eyes, my eyes, were exhausted. Do you know how many galas I've attended since I was 4? 73, I counted. That's not normal. No. A ghost of something flickered across her face, not quite a smile. But it's what I am. She returned her gaze to the magazine. I stood in the doorway, heart cracking along fault lines I hadn't known existed. She was testing me, seeing if I'd walk away like everyone else. I sat down in the doorway, not in her room, that wasn't my space yet, but close enough. Tell me about the 73 galas. She looked up, surprised, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she didn't tell me to leave. I waited until the house was asleep. 2 a.m. The grandfather clock in the foyer had chimed into silence an hour ago. Staff quarters dark. Vivian's wing sealed. Even the security cameras, and there were security cameras everywhere, I'd mapped them by now, ran on a rotation that left blind spots. I'd been a teacher for 15 years. I knew how to notice things people thought were invisible. The study door was still locked, but I'd spent the day watching the housekeeper, watching where she kept the master keys, watching which pocket, watching the rhythm of her rounds. A brass ring, an unlabeled key, a moment when her back was turned. Teachers steal things too. We're just better at not getting caught. Theron Armitage's study smelled like leather and secrets. Mahogany walls, Persian rug, a desk the size of a small country positioned to face floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the darkened grounds. Behind the desk, file cabinets, locked, but the keys were in a drawer. Of course they were. A man who trusted locked doors never expected anyone to get through them. I started with the most recent files and worked backward. Foundation documents, board minutes, tax records so complicated they needed their own translator. Then I found the folder labeled Private, Surrogacy Arrangement. My hands had stopped shaking by now. Whatever I found, I was ready. Or so I thought. The contract was familiar. I'd signed it 15 years ago. Standard surrogacy agreement, my duties, their payment. The termination of all parental rights upon live birth. I flipped the page. And there it was. A rider, an addendum, legal paper that had never touched my hands. Rider 4.7, genetic material. Donor egg provided by Kasia Morel. Genetic material approved by Theron Armitage, Seraphine Armitage. Date of consent documentation. The line from my signature was empty. I had never seen this document. I read it again. Donor egg provided by Kasia Morel. They hadn't just used my womb. They'd used me. My egg. My genetics. My daughter. Aurelia wasn't their biological child that I'd carried for money. She was my biological child, that they'd raised as their own. For 15 years, without telling me, without asking. I photographed the document with shaking hands. The flash lit the study for a split second. Theron's portrait above the fireplace, staring down at me with ice-blue eyes that had known this secret all along. Would I have consented? If they'd asked, if they'd told me they wanted my egg, not just my womb, would I have said yes? At 22, desperate, drowning in debt? I'll never know, because they never gave me the choice. I replaced the folder exactly where I'd found it, locked the cabinets, locked the door, walked back to my room on legs that didn't feel like mine. Aurelia Armitage was my daughter, my biological daughter, raised by strangers who'd stolen her from me before she took her first breath. I sat on the bed that wasn't mine, in a house that suddenly felt like a crime scene. And I understood, finally, fully, why Theron Armitage had put me in his will. He knew. He'd always known. And in his death, he'd finally given me the truth he'd hidden for 15 years. The question was, what was I supposed to do with it? I didn't sleep. The photograph on my phone glowed in the darkness every time I unlocked it. Writer 4.7, Genetic Material, Cassia Morell. The words had burned themselves into the backs of my eyelids. 3 a.m. 4. 5. The estate settled around me like a held breath. Somewhere in this house, my daughter slept in a room designed by strangers, dreaming dreams I'd never been part of. 15 years of dreams I'd missed. At 5:47 a.m., I called Margot. "Cass?" Her voice was sleep-rough, worried. Margot had been my teaching colleague for 8 years, my friend for longer. She was the only person who knew I was here, and the only person I trusted with this. "It's not even 6. What happened?" "They lied to me." The words came out cracked. "Margot, they used my egg. Not a donor's. Mine. Aurelia is—" I stopped, swallowed, started again. "She's my biological daughter. They stole my genetics and raised her as their own." Silence on the line. "Jesus Christ." Margot's voice sharpened into clarity. "Cass, that's criminal. That's fraud, medical fraud, reproductive coercion. You could—" "I know what I could do." I stared at the ceiling. "I could sue the clinic, the estate. I could go to the press. I could blow up their entire legacy. But she's 15 years old, and she just lost the only parents she's ever known. And she's already been treated like a product her entire life." I heard Margot exhale, the sound of someone who understood. "What are you going to do?" "I have to tell her, before someone else uses it against us." "Us?" "She's my daughter, Margot. I know I didn't raise her. I know I signed her away. But she's mine. And the only way I can prove I'm not here to exploit her is to tell her the truth myself, before Vivienne or the lawyers or the board can twist it into a weapon." How do you tell a teenage girl that her dead parents lied to her about where she came from? I don't know. My voice broke slightly. But I have to try. I hung up and watched the sky lighten through the window. My reflection stared back. A woman who'd been a stranger yesterday and was a mother today. I rehearsed the words in my head. "Aurelia, there's something I need to tell you. Something I just learned. Your parents, the people who raised you, they didn't use a donor egg. They used mine. You're my biological daughter. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Every version sounded wrong. Every version sounded like an excuse. But she deserved to hear it from me. Not from a lawyer. Not from a grandmother who saw her as a legacy to control. Not from court documents or tabloid leaks. From me, her mother. I showered, dressed in something soft, a cream sweater, dark trousers, armor that didn't look like armor. I brushed my hair and looked at my own amber-brown eyes in the mirror and saw Aurelia staring back. Today. I would tell her today. I just had to find her before anyone else did. They're about to reveal the truth to a 15-year-old girl who's been treated like a brand her entire life. Would you tell her yourself? Or let someone else do it first? Comment your answer below, and let us know where you're watching from. I went to find Aurelia at 9. She wasn't in her room. The bed was made, or had never been slept in. Her phone sat on the nightstand, buzzing with notifications she wasn't there to ignore. She's with Mrs. Armitage, a housekeeper passing in the hall, voice neutral, eyes that said, "You should hurry." I found them in Vivian's private sitting room. The door was ajar. I heard Aurelia's voice first. "I don't understand. What are you—" Then Vivian's, cold, precise, the voice of someone delivering a killing blow. "I'm saying, Aurelia, that the woman who claims to be your guardian has been lying to you since she arrived." I pushed the door open. The room was smaller than I expected, intimate in the way only old money could afford. Vivian sat in a wing chair by the window, morning light haloing her silver hair. She wore dove gray today, mourning softened to something more tactical. In her lap, a folder. Documents I recognized. Aurelia stood in the center of the room, white-faced, arms wrapped around herself, sleeves pulled over her wrists. Her amber-brown eyes, my eyes, wide, with something worse than anger. Betrayal. "Cassia." Vivian's voice was silk over steel. "How good of you to join us. I was just explaining to Aurelia what I found in my son-in-law's study this morning." This morning. She'd gone in after me, checked what I'd touched, found what I'd found. Of course she had. "Vivian, these documents indicate that you are Aurelia's biological mother." She lifted the folder like evidence at trial. Not a gestational surrogate. The genetic donor. Her actual mother. Aurelia made a sound. Small. Wounded. "And you've known this," Vivian continued, "since you arrived. Yet you said nothing. Pretended to be a stranger while worming your way into her confidence." "That's not true." My voice came out sharp. "I only found out last night." "How convenient." Vivian's smile was thin enough to draw blood. "You break into a locked study in the middle of the night, discover documents that give you a biological claim to a $4 billion estate. And we're supposed to believe you just learned this? That you weren't planning this the moment you received the will?" "Aurelia," I stepped toward her. "I was coming to tell you. This morning, I swear." "Don't!" Her voice cracked. She stepped back. Her eyes, my eyes, filled with something I recognized too well. The look of someone who'd been lied to by everyone she'd ever trusted. "You said you weren't here for the money." Her voice was barely audible. "You said you wanted to help." "I do." "You're my mother?" The word came out broken. "My biological mother. And you've been here for days, watching me, following me around, acting like... She couldn't finish. Her breathing went ragged. "Aurelia, please, let me explain." "Get out!" "Aurelia, get out!" She ran past me into the hallway. Her footsteps echoed on the marble, fast, desperate. The sound of someone trying to escape something that had already gotten inside. I stood, frozen. Vivian hadn't moved. "You should have left when you had the chance, Ms. Morel." She closed the folder with terrible calm. "Now it's too late for all of us." I looked at the door Aurelia had slammed, at the grandmother who had just shattered whatever fragile trust we'd built, at the truth that had become a weapon in the wrong hands. She was right about one thing. It was too late. I found her door locked. "Aurelia," I knocked again. "Aurelia, please, Just let me explain. Silence. I didn't know. When I signed that contract, I was 22. I was broke. I thought I was helping a couple who couldn't have children. They told me they were using a donor egg, someone else's genetics, not mine. I didn't find out the truth until 2 nights ago. Nothing. I was coming to tell you this morning. Before Vivian. I swear to you, I wasn't going to hide it. I wasn't going to use it. Still, nothing. I know you have no reason to believe me. I know everyone in your life has treated you like a product, like an investment, like something to manage. My voice cracked. But I see you, Aurelia. The real you. The girl who's survived 73 galas without anyone asking if she was okay. The girl who tests everyone because no one has ever stayed. I'm staying. Even if you never let me in. Even if you hate me forever. I'm staying. I pressed my palm flat against the door. Because you're my daughter. And that means something to me. Even if it doesn't mean anything to you yet. No answer. But something felt wrong. The silence was too complete. Aurelia? No movement. No sound of footsteps walking away. I ran. The housekeeper opened the door. I pushed past her. The bathroom. Light under the door. She was on the tile floor. Her arms were out, her sleeves pushed up. The scars I'd glimpsed beneath cashmere, old, healed, white, were now surrounded by fresh red lines. Not deep, not dangerous, but raw. And she was staring at them like she didn't recognize her own hands. Aurelia. I dropped to my knees beside her. Aurelia, look at me. Her eyes, our eyes, found mine. Unfocused, hollow. Everyone lies, she whispered. Everyone always lies. I rode in the ambulance, held her hand, the hand that didn't grip back. Watched the EMTs take her vitals and ask questions I couldn't answer. History of self-harm? Yes, old scars. Currently on medication? I don't know. Emergency contact? I'm supposed to be her guardian. The hospital was cold and bright and smelled like everything sterile. They took her for evaluation. I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, staring at walls the color of surrender. Would you have done the same thing at 22? The question circled in my head like a vulture. Signed a contract you didn't fully understand. Taken money you desperately needed. Trusted people who had lawyers, and you had nothing. Would you have sold your body, and maybe your genetics, for $75,000 and a chance to survive another year? The answer was yes. The answer was always yes. That was the horror of it. I looked up. Vivian entered the waiting room like a general inspecting a battlefield. Behind her, 2 lawyers, Rhodes Calloway and Dorian. He stood apart from the group, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching me with something that wasn't quite suspicion anymore. This is what happens, Vivian said, voice carrying across the room, when amateurs are given responsibility for vulnerable children. I stood. My legs were unsteady, but I stood. She's not a vulnerable child to you. She's a line item, an asset, a brand. Ms. Morell, I watched your board member talk about her visibility metrics while she sat there like a doll. I watched you schedule her grief, and now you want to blame me for the fact that she's breaking? Vivian's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her steel blue eyes. The board meets in 10 days. I'll be moving for full guardianship on grounds of your unsuitability. She stepped closer. You can fight. Drag that girl through court, through depositions, through photographers. Let the press find out that her guardian is actually her secret biological mother who's been hiding in plain sight. Or you can leave quietly, sign away your claims, and let us handle this the way it should have been handled from the start. I looked at the lawyers, at Rhodes, already calculating his next brand strategy, at Vivian, who genuinely believed control was love, at Dorian, who hadn't said a word, but whose eyes told me something had shifted. No. The word was quiet, but it landed like a stone. Ms. Morell, I'm not leaving her. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not going to let you turn her into a press release or a quarterly projection. I met Vivian's gaze. You can take me to court. You can drag us both through hell. But I am her mother. And that's not something a board vote can take away. Vivian's jaw tightened. For one moment, just one, she looked like what she was, a grieving woman who had lost her daughter and was terrified of losing her granddaughter too. Then the mask returned. We'll see. She turned to leave. The lawyers followed. Rhodes followed. Dorian didn't. He waited until they were gone. Then he walked across the waiting room and stood in front of me. I saw what she did. His voice was low. In the sitting room. I was in the hallway. I said nothing. I've seen my family destroy people for 15 years. I thought you were another one of them. He paused, ran a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man reconsidering everything. I was wrong. What do you want, Dorian? I owe you an apology. He met my eyes, dark brown, searching. And I might be able to help. For the first time since I'd arrived at the Armitage estate, I wasn't completely alone. The estate felt different now. Smaller. Darker. Or maybe I was different. The woman who'd arrived 6 days ago had been trying to survive. The woman walking these halls now was trying to win a war. I found Dorian in the library, same room where I'd studied photo albums, looking for proof of what I already knew. He stood at the window, watching the rain turn the grounds to gray. You came back. He didn't turn around. Where else would I go? He turned then. Dark brown eyes, the scar on his jaw catching the gray light. He'd changed out of yesterday's hospital clothes. Dark sweater now, collar open, sleeves pushed up. Those calloused hands that didn't match his inheritance. My father cut me out of succession when I was 23. His voice was flat, matter of fact. He said I was too emotional to lead, that I'd make decisions with my heart instead of my head. I said nothing. Waited. He was right. Dorian moved to the library table, pulled out a chair. I stayed anyway, told myself I could protect Aurelia from inside the machine, watch out for her when no one else would. And I failed. He met my eyes. I watched them turn her into content, schedule her childhood, medicate her anxiety instead of addressing it. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. His jaw tightened. When you arrived, I thought you were another vulture, another opportunist looking to pick the bones. He paused. I was wrong about that. But I was also wrong about something else. What? I was wrong to think watching was enough. He pushed something toward me, a folder, thick, official. I have access to board communications, internal memos, things Rhodes doesn't know I can see. He tapped the folder. They have a 15-year plan for Aurelia, engagement projections through 2039, partnership deals, brand valuations. I opened the folder. The first page was enough. Aurelia Armitage, Visibility Strategy 2024 to 2039. They're planning to run her like a product for the next 15 years, unless someone stops them. I looked at Dorian, at the scar, the stubble, the hands that had chosen labor over luxury, at a man who'd stayed in a machine he hated because he thought it was the only way to matter. Why help me? You don't know me. I know what I saw at the hospital. His voice dropped. Vivienne didn't care that Aurelia was bleeding. She cared that you were there to see it. The words landed like stones. She's been waiting for you to fail since the moment you walked through those doors. Dorian leaned forward. And she's not going to stop until you're gone and Aurelia is back under her control. Back to the schedule. Back to the brand. What exactly is in these memos? Everything. He opened the folder wider. Engagement projections, media appearance quotas, clauses in foundation agreements that require her continued public visibility until she's 30. Rhodes has been building this for years. Aurelia isn't their heir. She's their intellectual property. I turned the pages. Charts, graphs, a 15-year-old girl reduced to data points and quarterly targets. They know she's breaking, I said, and they're just optimizing around it. That's exactly what they're doing. I looked up from the folder, at Dorian, at this man who'd watched from inside the machine and finally decided watching wasn't enough. If we expose this at the board meeting, it might work. It might not. He was honest. I appreciated that. Vivienne has 10 days to build her case for your removal. Rhodes has the board's ear. And you're still the stranger who took money for her womb and showed up the moment there was an inheritance. Then why help me? For a moment, he didn't answer. Rain streaked the library windows. The clock on the mantel ticked. Because she's my sister. His voice was quiet. Not by blood, but I've watched her grow up in this house. I've seen what they did to her. And I'm done pretending it's not my problem. I closed the folder, looked at the man who'd gone from interrogator to ally in the space of a hospital waiting room. What do you need from me? Access, time, and your word that whatever we find, you won't use it to take the money and run. I don't want the money. I know. He almost smiled. Almost. That's why I'm helping you. We had 10 days. 10 days to find enough evidence to stop a machine that had been running for 15 years. I pulled the folder toward me and started reading. We worked for 3 days. Dorian's office at Armitage Dynamics was on the 43rd floor, 4 below the executive suite, far enough to be overlooked, close enough to access the shared servers. He had a security clearance that predated Rhodes's tenure, an oversight no one had bothered to correct. Billionaires build empires on the assumption that the people they discard won't come back. They should have revoked his access years ago. The files were organized by year. I started with 2020 and worked forward while Dorian pulled financial projections. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan glittered like it didn't know what was happening in this quiet office. Found it. Dorian turned. I angled my screen toward him. Aurelia Armitage, Visibility Strategy 2024-2039. Prepared by Rhodes Calloway, Chief Brand Officer. Distribution, board members only. I scrolled. The document was 47 pages. Engagement projections through her 30th birthday. Partnership valuations tied to her continued public presence. A calendar of required appearances, foundation galas, magazine interviews, social media content schedules, mapped out for the next 15 years. They've planned her entire adult life. My voice came out flat. Every public appearance, every brand deal, every photograph. Dorian leaned over my shoulder, pointed at a section header. Risk management, psychological factors. I clicked. The language was clinical, bloodless. Subject displays ongoing anxiety consistent with high visibility. Childhood. Recommend continued pharmacological management. Current, 20 milligrams escitalopram daily, alongside enhanced media coaching to minimize visible distress during public engagements. They knew. They'd always known. I scrolled further. A memo from Rhodes to the board, dated 3 months ago. The girl's emotional instability is manageable with proper medication and media coaching. Recommend against reducing public schedule, as visibility directly correlates with donor engagement. Foundation Q3 donations decreased 12% following her reduced summer appearances. We cannot afford another gap. They'd watched her break. They'd medicated her to keep performing. And when she couldn't perform well enough, they'd noted the revenue loss. Cassia. I looked at Dorian. His face had gone pale. There's more. He pulled up another document, a spreadsheet. Aurelia Armitage, brand equity valuation. The number at the bottom, $340 million. Projected lifetime value to the Armitage Foundation, based on her continued public presence, her image licensing, her authentic connection with next-generation philanthropic donors. She wasn't their heir. She wasn't their granddaughter. She wasn't even their ward. She was their $340 million investment. I photographed everything. Document after document, memo after memo. The flash lit the dark office like lightning, capturing proof of a system that had never seen a child, only a commodity. Is this enough? Dorian's voice was rough. For the board meeting? I don't know. I stared at the screen, at Aurelia's face on a brand deck, smiling the smile she'd learned at 7. But it's enough for me. Enough to know that walking away wasn't an option. Enough to know that if I fought for power, I'd become part of the machine that had chewed her up. Enough to know that the only way to save her was to destroy everything they'd built, including any claim I might have to it. Aurelia was discharged on day 6, not to the estate, to a step-down facility, a place with soft lighting and careful supervision and no tabloid photographers at the entrance. I'd negotiated that much at least. Vivian had wanted her home. I'd wanted her safe. For once, I won. She was in a private room when I arrived, January gray light through the window. The walls were a careful shade of sage green, designed to calm, I supposed. It wasn't working. She sat on the bed in clothes I didn't recognize, soft gray sweater, leggings. Someone from the estate must have brought them. Her dark, honey-blonde hair was loose, washed, brushed straight for the first time since the crisis. She looked younger this way, and older. Her amber-brown eyes tracked me as I stepped inside. My eyes. Still my eyes. You came. Her voice was flat, not hostile, not yet, just careful. I said I would. Everyone says that. I closed the door behind me, didn't move closer. She needed the distance. Aurelia, I need to tell you something. The full truth. No more secrets. She laughed, a small, broken sound. More truth? There's more? Just let me finish, please. I stayed by the door, hands at my sides. The hardest confession I'd ever make. When I was 22, I was broke. Student loans, credit card debt, a job that didn't cover rent. A surrogacy agency offered me $75,000 to carry a baby for a couple who couldn't have children. I paused, breathed. I said yes. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. They told me they were using a donor egg, someone else's genetics. I would carry the pregnancy, deliver the baby, and sign away my parental rights. I thought, my voice caught. I thought I was giving a couple a child they couldn't have any other way. I signed the contract, I carried the pregnancy, I gave birth, and then I took the money and I left, because that's what the contract said I was supposed to do. Aurelia's hands gripped the blanket, knuckles white. I never saw the baby, never held her, never asked about her, because asking would have made it real, and I stopped, started again. I couldn't afford for it to be real. When did you know? Her voice was barely audible. That it was me. I suspected the night I arrived. The photograph in the welcome folder. Your eyes. I touched my own face involuntarily. By day 3, I was certain. I broke into your father's study. I found the rider to the surrogacy contract, the one I never signed. The one that said they used my egg, not a donor's. I was going to tell you. The morning your grandmother told you, I was coming to find you. I'd rehearsed the words all night. I wanted you to hear it from me. But she got there first. Yes. Aurelia looked away, out the window, at the rain. So you're my real mother. The words came out strange, testing the shape of them. And you sold me. The accusation landed exactly where she meant it to. I sold a pregnancy I didn't understand the terms of. I trusted people who lied to me about what I was giving away. I kept my voice steady, barely. I didn't sell you. I didn't know you existed. But you took the money. Yes. Would you have done it differently, if you'd known? The question I'd ask myself every hour since I found that document. I don't know. Honest. Terrible. At 22, with the debt I had, the fear I had, I don't know what I would have agreed to. That's the truth. I can't give you a version of myself that was braver than I was. She was quiet. The rain grew heavier. Do you want the money? Her voice was thin. Is that why you're still here? I stepped closer, not to crowd her, just to be seen. I want you. I didn't know that until I met you, until I watched you survive in that house full of people who see you as a spreadsheet, until I saw your 73 galas and your practiced smile and your scars you hide under cashmere. My voice broke slightly. I want you. Not the money, not the empire. You. She didn't respond, but she didn't tell me to leave. I sat down, on the chair by the door, close enough to see her, far enough to give her space. I'm not going anywhere, Aurelia, however long this takes. She turned away, pulled the blanket higher, but she didn't tell me to leave. The night before the board meeting, I couldn't sleep. I found myself in the library, same mahogany shelves, same leather-bound volumes, same photo albums I'd once searched for proof of what I'd suspected. Proof I didn't need anymore. I spread the documents across the table, everything we'd gathered. The surrogacy contract, with its unsigned rider, the DNA report Vivian had weaponized, the board memos, the engagement projections, Aurelia's hospital discharge papers signed that afternoon. The evidence of a 15-year crime laid out in corporate letterhead and clinical language. Thought I might find you here. Dorian stood in the doorway. Dark sweater, same as before. He moved differently tonight, less guarded. Or maybe I just saw him differently now. He crossed to the table, looked down at the spread of papers. "You've been staring at these for 3 hours." "I've been trying to decide." "Decide what?" I turned to face him. The firelight caught the scar on his jaw, the gray at his temples. A man who'd spent 12 years watching a family destroy itself from the inside, who'd finally chosen to fight. "If we go public with these," I gestured at the memos, "I might win. Legal standing as biological mother, proof of exploitation, enough to challenge Vivian's guardianship and maybe even the board's control. Maybe. But Aurelia becomes the story. Every outlet, every photographer, her mental health history, her hospitalization, her secret biological mother who took money for her womb. I exhaled. For years, decades maybe, she'd never escape it. Dorian was quiet. The fire crackled. Or I walk away, sign over every claim, the guardianship, the voting rights, the inheritance, all of it. I paused, and in exchange, I negotiate one thing. Aurelia is removed from all public obligations until she's 18. No galas, no interviews, no brand deals. They can have the empire, but they can't have her. You'd give up billions. I'd give up everything. My voice steadied. The question is whether she'd come with me. Dorian moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of lighter brown in his dark eyes, close enough to smell leather and rain, and something underneath, something that had nothing to do with boardrooms or battles. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." His voice was low. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." His hand touched mine, warm, calloused, real. Most people, when they get a chance at $4 billion, don't spend their nights figuring out how to give it away. I didn't pull my hand back. "I'm not giving it away. I'm trading it for something that actually matters." "And if she doesn't choose you? If she stays?" The question I hadn't let myself ask. "Then at least she'll know someone thought she was worth more than a brand valuation." For a moment, just a moment, I thought he might kiss me. The firelight, the silence, the weight of everything we'd built in these few desperate days. But the moment passed. I stepped back. Not rejection, recognition. "I have to decide this alone." He nodded. Understood. "Whatever you choose, I'm staying. Inside the machine." He gathered the documents, began sorting them. "Someone has to fight from the inside, whether you're here or not." "Dorian, don't." He looked up. Dark brown eyes, steady. "This isn't about you. This is about her. And about the years I spent watching and doing nothing." He left the library. His footsteps faded down the marble corridor. I stood alone with the documents, the contract that had brought me here, the DNA that proved what I'd never known, the memos that revealed what had always been true. I could become a billionaire, or I could become a mother. The fire burned low. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Tomorrow would answer everything. The Armitage Dynamics boardroom occupied the 47th floor. Glass walls, Manhattan sprawling below like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. I'd dressed simply. Dark trousers, white blouse, a blazer I'd owned for years, the one I wore to parent-teacher conferences, not power plays. My hair was pulled back, my hands were still. For the first time since I'd opened that envelope in my apartment, my hands were completely still. The room was already full when I arrived. Vivian sat at the head of the table, silver-white bob immaculate, steel blue-gray eyes tracking me as I entered. She wore charcoal today, not morning black anymore, victory gray. Rhodes Calloway flanked her left, small gray-green eyes calculating, Rolex catching the light as he shuffled papers. 2 other board members I didn't recognize, lawyers, assistants. And at the far end, Dorian, arms crossed, dark brown eyes meeting mine for one moment before he looked away. "Ms. Morel?" Vivian's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "How good of you to join us. Please, sit." I didn't sit. "The motion before the board," Rhodes began, reading from a prepared statement, "is the transfer of guardianship of Aurelia Armitage from Cassia Morel to Vivienne Armitage on grounds of unsuitability, deception, and demonstrated instability in care." He looked up, smiled the smile of a man who'd already counted his winnings. "Mrs. Armitage will assume full control of Aurelia's trust, public obligations, and representation. Ms. Morel will be required to vacate the estate within—" "I'm not here to fight you." The words landed in the silence like stones in still water. Rhodes stopped mid-sentence. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry?" "I said—" I stepped forward, toward the table, toward the window, toward the empire spread out below us. "I'm not here to fight you for control." Dorian shifted, in his chair. I didn't look at him. "Then what, exactly, are you here for?" Vivian's voice was careful, testing. I turned to face her. "I'm here to negotiate the terms of my surrender." I pulled the documents from my bag, set them on the table. "I'm prepared to sign away all claims to the Armitage estate, the foundation, the voting rights, the guardianship." I paused. "Completely, irrevocably." Silence. Vivian's expression flickered, surprise, quickly masked. Rhodes leaned forward, small eyes calculating. "You're resigning guardianship?" His voice was careful, looking for the trap. "I'm signing away everything." "In exchange for what?" Vivian's voice was sharp now. "What do you want, Ms. Morel? A settlement? A percentage? Name your price." I looked at her, at this woman who'd lost her daughter and was terrified of losing her granddaughter, who'd spent 15 years watching Aurelia be turned into content and told herself it was legacy. "Aurelia is removed from all public obligations until she turns 18. "I'm sorry? No interviews, no galas, no brand deals, no media coaching, no foundation appearances, no visibility strategy." I kept my voice level. "She finishes treatment. She finishes high school. She lives as a person instead of a product." Rhodes sputtered. That would require restructuring the entire foundation visibility model. Donor relationships depend on—" "I don't care what it costs you." I slid the papers across the table. "Those are my terms. You get the estate, the foundation, the $4.2 billion. Every claim I might have had." Vivian stared at me, steel blue-gray eyes trying to find the angle. "And if Aurelia refuses?" Her voice was quiet now. "If she chooses to stay? Then at least she'll have a choice. Something no one's given her in 15 years. I held her gaze. "But if she chooses to, come with me, you let her go. No custody battles, no media campaigns, no lawyers. You let her walk out of this house, and you leave her alone." The boardroom was silent. Manhattan glittered below, indifferent. Rhodes looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at the documents, at the signature line, at the woman who'd just offered to trade billions for a teenage girl's freedom. "You're giving up everything." Her voice was strange, almost wondering. "No, I'm giving up everything that doesn't matter." I signed and watched $4 billion become someone else's problem. I found her in her room. Not the hospital room, not the sterile green walls and careful lighting. Her room. The vast bedroom with the king bed and the 12 pillows and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking grounds she'd never been allowed to play in. She sat on the edge of the bed, one small bag beside her. The rest of the room, the designer furniture, the curated art, the walk-in closet full of clothes selected by stylists, untouched. She was wearing something I hadn't seen before: jeans, a simple blue sweater, sneakers, her dark honey-blonde hair in a ponytail. She looked like a normal 15-year-old. She looked like she'd made a decision before I walked in. "It's done." My voice came out steadier than I expected. They agreed. "You're free from all of it until you're 18. No galas, no interviews, no brand obligations." She nodded. Didn't look surprised. "And you?" I signed everything away. No money, no power, no claim to anything. Her amber brown eyes, my eyes, studied me, looking for the catch, the angle. 15 years of training her to find the manipulation in every kindness. "Why?" "Because you're worth more than a brand valuation. Because you deserve to figure out who you are without cameras following you. Because—" I stopped, started again. "Because I'm your mother. And that's what mothers do." She didn't respond. Not immediately. I stepped into the doorway. Not closer. Gave her the space she needed. "I'm leaving. Going back to my apartment. My life. Nothing like this." I gestured at the room, the mansion, the grounds, the empire. "But I'm not leaving without asking. Do you want to come with me?" The question hung in the air. The question I'd been terrified to ask since the moment I understood what she was to me. "Where would we go?" Her voice was small, young, the child underneath the armor. "I have a small apartment, 1 bedroom, we'd figure that out, a job, friends, nothing glamorous, nothing optimized." I paused. "But it's real." She looked around the room, at the 4-poster bed, the silk curtains, the price tags on every surface. Then she looked at the single bag beside her. She stood, picked up the bag, left everything else. We walked out of the estate together. No cameras, no handlers, no lawyers. Just a woman and a girl and a bag and a choice. The empire won its battle. Vivian got the foundation. Rhodes got his CEO title. The machine kept running. But they lost the girl. And I'd traded $4 billion for a daughter I'd given away at 22. 15 years too late. Just in time. Can you earn the right to be a mother when you once gave your child away for money? I don't know. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to find out. 3 months later. The apartment hadn't changed. Same worn couch, same stacks of essays waiting to be graded, same plants on the windowsill, reaching for light through old windows. But something was different. There was a purple backpack by the door now, sneakers that weren't mine. A girl at my kitchen table doing homework, actual homework, with a pencil she kept forgetting behind her ear. I made her lunch, turkey sandwich, apple, The same lunch I would have made myself at her age. The same lunch my mother made me before I became the woman who sold her body to pay for college. On the counter, a newspaper headline I didn't read. Armitage Foundation names Vivian Armitage as chair. They won. The foundation, the empire, the $4.2 billion, all of it went exactly where they wanted it to go. Except for one thing. You could have had all of that. Aurelia's voice, quiet, not looking up from her textbook. I sealed the bag, wrote her name on it, added a small heart I'd never have dared to draw a month ago. I have you. I set the bag beside her. That's the better deal. She looked at me, amber brown eyes, my eyes, searching for the performance, the angle, the hidden cost. She didn't find one, and she smiled. Small, real. The first real one I'd ever seen from her. My phone buzzed, a text from Dorian. The board approved the restructure. I'm staying to fight from inside. When you're ready, I'll be here. I read it, considered, didn't reply. Some doors stay open. You don't have to walk through them to know they're there. Aurelia grabbed her backpack, grabbed the lunch, paused at the door. Bye, Mom. Mom. The word I'd never earned. The word I'd never expected to hear. I stood in my kitchen, morning light, the newspaper I'd never read, the life I'd never imagined. I could have been chair of her empire. Instead, I learned her favorite sandwich. And that's the only inheritance that ever mattered. This is American Billionaire Tales, where fortune meets fate. I'm Michael, and some fortunes are measured in billions. Others are measured in brown paper bags, and the daughters who finally come home. If this story moved you, if you're still thinking about Cassia and Aurelia and the choice she made, then you understand what we're building here. We're creating stories that matter, stories that haunt, stories that make you question what you'd sacrifice for what you love. And we need your help. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Help us reach 1,000 people who believe that stories can be more than entertainment. They can be mirrors. Because next time, another family will learn that some secrets don't stay buried, and some debts can never be repaid. Until then,